questioning is perhaps the greatest gift we have as human beings.
Science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking.
It's a way of thinking that teaches us to question everything we think we know.
Science came about by developing techniques, methodologies for gaining reliable knowledge about the world.
We have at our fingertips the technologies that were only possible for the largest governments and corporations 20 years ago as an individual today.
If the human civilization continued at anything remotely like the current pace of technology advancement for a million years, where would we be? I think we're either extinct or on a lot of planets.
The good thing about science is that it's true whether or not you believe in it.
We hold the scientific method in high regard because it works. If it stopped working, we'd throw it out.
Discover the past.
Create the future.
This is the Here and How podcast.
Welcome to the Here and How podcast, where every week we dive deep into big ideas, exploring the past so that we can create a brighter future together. I'm Thomas Westbrook, and I'm joined by two wonderful, magnificent co-hosts, Stephen Woodford and Rachel Oates. Say hi, guys.
Hello, guys.
Hi.
Rachel, Stephen, you both use technology, right? You have smartphones. You have computers.
No,
you're YouTubers.
I actually live in the forest.
Yeah, same.
Being from the UK.
That's what we do.
We don't use any technology, we poop in the woods. We live in the woods.
Have you ever thought, obviously you have because you live in the woods, what it would be like to have a world overrun by robots?
Dun dun dun.
So for this episode, we're going to be looking at the concept of the future of artificial intelligence. What is the history of it? How did we get here? How is this new breakthrough in technology different from the past 100 years and past breakthroughs, such as the Industrial Revolution? And where are we going? What is going to happen? Do any of us even know? What are the trends, and how can we make sure that it's a smooth transition into a better future rather than a chaotic post-apocalyptic world where we all eat each other to stay alive because the robots are hunting us and food is scarce?
Wait, if the robots are hunting us, but we're eating each other to stay alive, isn't that counterproductive?
Well, it is, but there's no food left.
Okay.
Because the robot sees the means of production.
Ah. No food at all. What about wild foxes?
Wild foxes?
Yeah.
How many wild foxes are we planning to feed 7 billion humans with?
7 billion?
7 billion foxes?
Yeah.
And then what? We'll move on to wild rhinoceroses.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure one of those could feed a couple of people.
And if the robots go after them?
Bunnies.
So the other day I was on YouTube looking up information or watching TED videos on artificial intelligence. And it was funny because YouTube's algorithms, its robots per se, recommended two videos, one right on top of the other. They had, the title of the first one was, "Robots Will Steal Your Job, but That's Okay." And the second one was, "Why We'll Never Run Out of Jobs." So they're two completely different opposing positions, both delivered at TEDx conferences. And then if I scrolled down just a little bit further, there was, "Artificial intelligence, it will kill us."
Oh, God. I'm going to say that I'm not sure the first two are directly opposing.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well.
Yeah, the first one's saying robots will take our current jobs, but it doesn't matter. Whereas the other ones are saying, even when robots take our jobs, there'll still be other jobs for us, so we'll still have some jobs.
Well, depending on how far you go with the scenario, and we're going to dive into that with this episode, there is kind of the extreme scenario of robots stealing literally all of the jobs to where there's nothing left for you to do because robots do it better.
Even fixing the robots.
There's robots to fix other robots.
It's true.
So there's robots that program other robots.
It's turtle robots all the way down.
So the history of this, if you look at basic economics, in order to, grow wealth and to have a society that thrives and prospers and that grows, you have to have an increase in capital. So let's say that I go out and I'm able to spend all day and I catch a fish with my hands. Well, I come home and I've just spent all day getting enough food to eat for that one day. But then let's say that I go hungry for 3 days and I build this net that then allows me to catch 10 fish. And suddenly I have a surplus of fish. Well, I might tell, other people that, hey, if you go and you work for me, then I'll give you a certain amount of this fish that I catch. And suddenly you have an increase in capital, and it allows people to specialize because there's an excess, there's a surplus in goods. There's been an increase in productivity. There's been an increase in capital that has allowed us to have, more surplus, which then makes everyone better off in society.
Yeah.
Now, what happens, though, when all of a sudden you get to a point where rather than you specializing in one task and Steve and Rachel specializing in another task and me specializing in a third task, what if there are no tasks left to specialize in? What do you do then?
Do you mean as the individual needing work, needing money, etc.?
Yeah, because you have an entire system that's based off of this notion that you have to have people at the bottom that have something to trade. They have something to offer, whether it's their time to go and work for you, or whether it's, you've specialized in, weaving baskets and Rachel is specialized in making jam. And suddenly, we have the best baskets and the best jam and the best fish. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, if all of this becomes automated, if there's no jobs left to do, well, suddenly you have three people who are potentially consumers. You're potentially someone who could buy jam and buy baskets and buy fish, but you don't have an income source anymore because you don't have a job. And if you have 70% of the population that is suddenly, has no income source and no job, well, they're looking for food somehow. They're looking for some way to provide for their families, but they're also a potential market source. They're potential people to sell iPhones to and to sell jam and baskets and whatnot to. But if they don't have anything to offer in exchange for it, then even the people at the top, who are they going to sell these products to? If the workforce is completely shrunk. So in order to have, as you have a growing population, you have to have a growing workforce. You have to have an increased number of jobs to give to the increase in population. People have been terrified about this for literally since long before computers came along. Are either of you familiar with the Luddites?
No,
I've
I'm
heard
not.
of it. Oh, them.
I mean, you know the
I know
term,
the word.
right?
Yeah.
So a Luddite is basically someone who's opposed to technology.
Mm.
They think that technology is like, it's like here to take our job.
Do they tell you that via their phone?
So were they like an actual group of people then? It's not just a word.
Yeah, it started in 1811 to 1816. There was the Luddite Rebellion. And it was a collective of textile workers who, they had this skill set. And all of a sudden there were these mills, these textile mills that were coming along that were replacing them. They were putting out textile products at a much quicker rate, very high quality goods that were, it was like just a textile mill that's, they're like, here are all this stuff that, we've spent our entire lives specializing in. All of a sudden you have this industrial alternative that is replacing us. And so they went in and they started burning down the mills and trying to actually destroy the new technology, but it didn't work. It never works.
No.
Never in the history of technological advancement has, a group of people or some type of union that's been trying to stop the push or the progress of technological advancement. Like, it just doesn't work. As long as there's capital incentive for a company to to have better, more efficient technology, it's going to do that every single time. In a capitalist system, it's going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're faced with kind of a new wave of that. And what might that be?
What are you referring to? Basically, all of our jobs, or all of the low-level jobs, or not so much low-level jobs that are easy in the sense that it's hard to explain. It's easy just in the sense that a computer can do it at its present state. Those jobs are gone, and it's not like there's more jobs being created. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, it's that so many of the jobs that we have now that we think, these are jobs that only people can do. They're slowly being, like, computers are getting smarter and smarter and more capable at an exponential rate. And they're not.
I just wanted to say, go ahead, Rachel.
I was going to say, I guess an example of that would be like people always thought you'd need retail workers, right, in shops to serve people and stock, like stack shelves and stuff like that. But now you can just order stuff online via a website, and then it gets picked in a warehouse with a little like droney robot thing, and then it can be delivered to your door basically without you ever seeing a human person. And so once these things are programmed, you don't need people anymore. So even the things that we once thought you needed that like human interaction for, that human element's been taken completely out.
I think the main scary thing is that computers are very, very good at doing simple tasks. So a calculator is infinitely smarter in that realm than a human.
Yeah.
But what they're not good at is complex tasks. But if you really look at what a complex task is, it's many, many small tasks. Yeah. And if we can program the computer so that it's good at all the small tasks, then it accomplishes the complex task. And I think that's the revolution that we're seeing now. And the result, of course, is that it is removing people. It's not the same as, Henry Ford, and when we go back to machinery back then, when instead of getting somebody to hammer all day a certain nut into a certain part of the car, you just get a machine to press it down much faster. It's not the same. You don't need anyone there at all. The machines do it all because they've managed to get the algorithm to be able to make it so that it does all those simple tasks to produce the ultimate complex thing. And that means there's tons of people out of a job.
And often machines do it better as well, because there isn't that human error factor. Machines don't get tired. Machines don't make mistakes that much. You know what I mean? Like, if it's a matter of scanning a barcode and picking the right item, machines are going to be better at that, more accurate than that than a human ever is.
Yes, it's just better. It's like a calculator. It's just better. It can figure out something instantly, essentially, where a human just can't. It just can't. No investment needed either.
One example of this is a barista, that people say like, oh, well, no one quite makes my coffee like my favorite coffee shop barista. But what if you have a computer that learns exactly how you like your coffee, and it not only learns that, but it saves it, and it saves it to a system of thousands of computers at coffee chains all across the world. And then no matter which one you go into, it'll make your coffee exactly the way that you want it at every single place. That's something a barista just can't do.
Yeah.
What are some other jobs that are kind of at danger of being replaced?
Look at Amazon. Amazon is incredibly convenient. So if I want something easier, go on Amazon. One, there's reviews by customers, and I trust the reviews because it reflects the decency, the quality of the product. That's already useful. Two, I can't find it cheaper anywhere. Yeah. And three is just the pure convenience of it. I don't have to go down and look at the shops in town. All shops are basically devastated by buying gifts, etc. online. Amazon on its own has floored an entire industry, and it's because it's more convenient and it just does it better. So you have all of those jobs being destroyed.
But even the brick and mortar businesses, a cashier, you used to have 30 cashiers. Now you have one person that overlooks a bunch of self-checkout lanes.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about the transportation industry or the shipping industry?
You used to have thousands of men basically lifting up the weight, getting it onto a ship so that could be moved across. It's all machines now. There's no need for it at all. It's built on algorithms to a large extent, so you really do not have to worry. You need one person just watching it over to make sure that this really heavy machinery doesn't mess up. And even if it does mess up, it pays for itself with how productive it is. You can hire 2 people instead of 1,000 people, and you'll get much more effort out of it, and it will work 24 hours if you need it to. You just say, right, you've got a 12-hour shift, you've got a 12-hour shift after them. Just watch over the machines, make sure that they maneuver this incredible weight. And as a capitalist, as somebody who's making money, a businessman, you're going to be substantially better off that way.
But what about like transportation? Because transportation right now, the number one, the biggest job category in the US that employs over 3 million people is transportation.
Do you mean like transporting people or goods?
That includes taxis. That includes bus drivers. That includes
what Well,
I'm not sure if that includes shipping as well. Like, I think that does include truck drivers too.
Well, like,
but
I remember when I was a kid in the UK, like, getting a train somewhere meant, like, you'd go on the train and you'd speak to the conductor and you'd buy a ticket from him. And then, like, you know, if the conductor switched, you'd show your ticket and, like, things like that. Whereas now you can do it all online and never see a person. Like, I can pay, you just scan your phone when you go through the doors here in London and pay via contactless. And you get on the train and then you get off the other end and scan your phone again, and you never have to speak to or see a person if you don't want. And
they used to,
as someone with like a little bit of social anxiety, I love it. I will go for the machine over the person every single time. But yeah.
Well, it's a double-edged sword though, because on the one hand, it is extremely convenient and it is kind of nice that you don't have to worry about that. At the same time, I think that there is an increase in social anxiety because we don't have as many human interactions. You know, it's not as commonplace. If it was all around us and as commonplace as it used to be, then, you know, I don't think that we would see as big of a spike in social anxiety as we have in the last few decades.
Yes, but there is an element to that, and it's kind of a failure on our own behalf rather than capitalism in general. That is, so as we've just been saying, I tend to take advantage of convenient things. Traveling, I don't tend to talk to people too often. I will go for the computer, the machinery option if it's there in many cases, especially when it's my corner shop, for example. I see like 9 or 10 people queuing and I just walk past them and go on to the self-service and I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out before the person who is being served is served because the cashier is telling them about something they don't care about. But to the same extent, I go to considerable effort to make sure that I do make sure that I fulfill the fact that I am a social being and that I need social interaction. So I go to several clubs. I play table tennis. I join my friends at the gym. I make sure that I meet with people regularly. And that just means that I recognize that, and I'm not getting that from everyday life. So I have to fill that niche or niche, depending on American or UK, somewhere else. Yes, I know.
It frees up more time for you to spend it in the ways that you want to.
Yeah, I there's nothing I hate more personally than my time being wasted, and that allows me to basically not have wasted time, not have wasted resources, and to be able to utilize the fact that I now have more time, more resources in areas that I personally very much enjoy. So
that's actually like a really good example. So this is gonna be irrelevant to you boys, but I saw an eyeshadow palette that I really wanted on Instagram, and I was like, I really want that. So you know, as you do, I'm sure you guys get it all the time. But I was like, I really want that. It's like the perfect colors. It's a brand I like. I want it. And I traipsed all over Lewisham the other week looking for this eyeshadow palette, like going to all the pharmacies, even trying like some of these supermarkets and places like that, and nowhere had it. And I wasted like a whole afternoon looking for this palette. And I was like, why am I being an idiot? I'll just order it on Amazon. So I ordered it yesterday afternoon. It arrived this morning, and I'm literally wearing the eyeshadow right now. I'm like, why didn't I just do that in the first place? It's like 5 minutes of time and just opening the door to someone instead of a whole afternoon wasted.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
And you also got it cheaper, I would imagine, than
probably,
you would have got in the shop. It's not the shop's fault.
And the plus side too is on the one hand, we do all benefit as consumers because the cost of everything is going down.
Yeah.
And when you look at, you know, the start of the 1900s, there was, you know, the majority of the population were involved in some type of agricultural work, subsistence farming, you know, trying to make a living off the land. Now it's like less than 2% or less than 1%. It's like some absolutely tiny fraction of the population. And we saw a shift where it went from agriculture to industrial workers to, you know, the service sector, you know, with the information age, where now we're giving, you know, service products. There's people who are teaching courses online. There's people who are, you know, selling insurance or legal products or all kinds of stuff, computer programmers, engineers, you know, and we're not as hands-on because we have more efficient ways to do that. We have robots and assembly lines that can do it efficiently and quickly and at a fraction of the cost. And even if you could do it faster, if you do it, you know, maybe 10% faster, but the robot costs a third of the price that a human does to maintain.
Get 2 robots.
You're just going to get more robots.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I wanted to say, there's tapping onto being able to get education, etc. if you want to learn, say, a course in philosophy, logical fallacies, to a large extent, in the past, you had to have an establishment which would teach that. So you had to have a school which is occupied by many, many, many people. You have to have a facility, a lesson in which that's taught. You'd have to have people manning that. You'd have to have people manning so many different areas in order for you to even have the opportunity to learn what you want to learn.
Yeah.
And then you have the teachers and you have the students, and there's more to it. These days, somebody can spend a considerable amount of time, create a very nice course, put it online, and hey presto, over the next year or so, he's had 1 million people, or she's had 1 million people take the course. Now, they don't get the paper at the end, which more and more companies do not give a shit about. And I don't think they should either, because it doesn't greatly matter in many fields. In some fields, doctor, for example, it does matter. But it doesn't in many other areas. But the point being is that that's one person, did work, put it online, probably very rich now, and 1 million people got what they wanted out of it. I don't know if you've been on YouTube lately, but an example is a guy's been doing a let me teach you how to draw class. It comes up on all of my videos all the time. And it's been running for about half a year, which means he's obviously doing well from it.
Yeah.
As far as jobs go, that's not good news. But as far as progress goes and access to information, it's wonderful.
Yeah. I feel like it does kind of work out for the people doing the jobs, though, because now, if we don't need people to do those kind of like bottom level jobs, then more people can focus on doing things that, I don't know, that are different and new and better for them, and maybe a little bit more creative. Like if I just look back at my family and like the history of jobs people have done, for generations my family were just like farmers and this is going to sound weird, but nail makers. So many people in my family were nail makers. And now you don't need actual people to sit there with a hammer hammering metal into nails like a machine does it.
Yeah.
So that meant that my parents' generation, they were the people who, like, my dad used to work in factories, my mum works in retail, they did that sort of stuff. And now that there aren't so many jobs in that area, like someone like me can do a job that wasn't even around 10 years ago, or, well, it was just about 10 years ago, and like be a YouTuber. Like my grandparents wouldn't even know what a YouTuber was when they were alive because it wasn't a thing. So I feel like as technology kind of takes away the lower end jobs, it does open more people up to these kind of new exciting jobs that weren't possible before because they had to do those things. We had to have people to do those things,
That's partially true, and I'm gonna
I would just wanted to
in a minute
basically just say that I totally get where you're coming from there, Rachel, but I actually, in this climate that we're currently in, I have the opposite opinion. I think with the population going up and so many jobs being put under machinery, we're at a state where, yes, people are free to be more creative, but they have to be able to put bread on the table, and they can't in many extent.
That's true.
Because it's that bad. Just one fact I wanted to throw out there was, if you look at Henry Ford, the car manufacturing industrial revolution, when it was at its most highest employment, you must have been looking at an enormous amount of people. But then when you look at Facebook, I think Facebook's run by a ridiculously small amount of people. And you look at that contrast, and you look at how much bigger Facebook is than pretty much, to some extent at least, the entire car situation. Losing my words here, sorry. But
the comparison I would give is in 2004, I think it was, Blockbuster was at its highest, and it had 84,000 employees.
It's a good one,
$6 billion in revenue. In 2016, Netflix had 1.5 times the revenue, so it was $9 billion, and they had 4,500. So 84,000 employees to 4,500.
Yeah.
That is, a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of, skeletal staff compared to what Blockbuster had.
And that's happening everywhere.
And it completely replaced that entire industry. And this is happening right now. There are estimates that somewhere around 45 to 50% of jobs in America could be replaceable within the next 20 years by robots or AI.
Yeah.
Or automation.
Yeah.
This might be a really unpopular opinion, but isn't this just kind of almost like sort of like evolution in practice though now? Because if robots are taking over the like crappier jobs and like the lower skilled people can't find work anymore, then it's kind of, you need to be more competitive to be more skilled to have those higher level jobs. Do you know what I mean? It seems harsh,
but we all know that evolution is true, but it doesn't mean that we think that evolution is the right answer. If you look at evolution, I know you're not making that argument. Yeah, I know that. But if you just look at evolution in general, it's a really, really horrible, harsh, brutish, and short environment. It's really not nice. So just as we don't want that when it comes to sexual activity, such as rape happens all the time in nature, we don't really want it when it comes to economic prosperity, because if the result is that you have billions of people which basically starve to death, it might just be due to personal incredulity, but so far as I can see, that is an imminent threat from just how automated things are going, when it's coupled with the fact that human population is increasing at the rate that it is.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm wrong on that.
I think my point is more, is it inevitable? Is this something we can change?
That's a great question. Yeah, sorry.
I would take a couple of points there. And one, I would say, Steve, I have a much less Malthusian approach to the world. And that one, when you look at the overall number of resources in the world, people said, back in the 1800s that populations were getting too big for the earth to sustain, and, we're all going to starve and stuff. And then they said that in the 1900s, and then they say it in the 2000s. And yet what we've seen is that these breakthroughs in agriculture and aquaculture and water desalination and stuff has provided, healthy, nutritious food and clean drinking water to populations sizes that to the level where we have excesses and we're throwing food away and we have massive amounts of food. And at the same time, we see across the world, total fertility rates have been on the decline and people have been having less and less and less children or fewer children.
Yeah, we innovate, hang on, is it less than 2 per couple?
You need about 2.1 per couple to maintain a population.
Yes.
And most countries in the West now are dipping below that, as well as some more modern countries like in Asia and other places. They're even countries that we've typically thought of as having just absolutely massive fertility rates have been dropping.
Yeah,
I knew gone from like 7 to like 4.
I have seen the statistics that show a big drop. I wasn't aware that so many, let's say, first world countries are at 2.1 or lower.
There's a population crisis now.
That's great, fantastic.
Where they say that you want it to be around 2 or so. When it starts getting too low, then what you have is you have a bunch of people retiring, and you don't have enough people, base workers to pay for like social security and welfare programs and stuff. Or to take care of the elderly. And so, you kind of want to have about the right balance, but it's definitely a good thing that fertility rates have been coming down, because we could not sustain, these exponential growth rates.
And you know how you were saying that we didn't have, people were saying we don't have the resources to be able to deal with this many people. This is very difficult. And it turns out we did. I think one of the key components there is that there is jobs, so people can actually participate in the market. But if we have a state where there is no jobs, then we're in big trouble. And it could really be an issue that wasn't an issue back then, because that was explicitly about population. This is about population in relation to their jobs being taken by machinery. I think it is fundamentally a different question.
And where I think I would agree with you completely there, Steve, is that that this is a very different scenario, because when you had the automobile revolution, when you had all these new cars, like it was creating an entire new industry worth of jobs. Now in the information age, there are new jobs there, but these jobs are like they're eliminating jobs faster than they're making them. And so a couple statistics that I want to show is since 1973, there's been a shrink in new job generation in the US. So the number of new jobs each year has been shrinking. And in the 2000s, or the first decade of the 2000s, it was the first decade where the total net number of jobs didn't grow as a whole. And in 15 years since 1998, or from 1998 to 2013, there were 194 billion hours worked per year. And in 1998, and in 2013, there was also 194 billion hours worked a year. So like the total number of hours worked did not go up, but the population grew by 40 million. There were thousands of new businesses. There were all kinds of new, jobs.
That's
but
bizarre.
We're replacing, even though the population is growing up, the total number of hours worked isn't. And we have so many of these jobs that, like, what is it? What kind of jobs can a robot not do eventually? We said, when Gary Kasparov, the greatest chess player in the world at the time, they said, a computer could never beat him. And then Deep Blue comes along and beats him at chess. And, then they said, a computer could never beat someone at Jeopardy. And then you have IBM's Watson that comes along and just destroys its opponents. 2016, AlphaGo beats the greatest Go player in the world, like a game so complex they said it never could.
And it's now beaten 10 at one time.
I think this is slightly taken out the human factor, though, because there are some jobs that a robot isn't ever going to be able to replace, like TV presenter. I mean, technically, yeah, you could have a human robot. You could have a robot TV presenter, but I think people would much rather watch other people. Like actors, people would much rather watch other people. And there's always going to be a market for handmade products, because it's going to be like a luxury that people like and people want and people will pay more for.
I think you're right. There's always going to be some jobs that can't be replaced, not because computers can't be as good at doing it as us, but because there's a human element. Yeah. There's a preference. But
here's a couple problems to that: is the entertainment industry and like creative jobs. They can only ever make up a small fraction, a small percentage in society, because they rely on the rest of the population to, take interest and to watch and be captivated. You cannot have 100% of the population all being YouTubers and artists and poets and stuff, because there's just not a big enough base to support all of them, if that makes sense.
Also, you have 1 or 2 or 3 news presenters. You don't have more. And it's just, it's a situation that it doesn't offer what's needed to deal with the crisis that's at hand, the crisis that's going to come. But you are right. There's always going to be a human element to it, that humans prefer humans. One thing I wanted to add is, I don't know if you two have read much of Karl Marx.
Some.
He's kind of thrown to... Fair enough. He's kind of thrown to the sideline these days because of his association with things that aren't Marxist, which is funny. But... the point I wanted to make is that he made a fantastic point about work and humans' needs. And it's something to do with, we need to feel valuable. So one solution to this might be that the government creates basically paper jobs, which is, here, dig this hole and then fill this hole back up. We'll pay you. Now, people can do that. And if that works, technically you're working. You know, these kind of scenarios aren't out of the periphery of what might be offered as a solution. But Marx, in my opinion, very much hit the nail on the head when he was talking about you must feel valued. You don't want alienation from your job, because it is a human need. We have evolved to require feeling valuable, and that's not a valuable job. Whereas at least when you're a cashier or something like that, which I don't mean that as a derogatory, that's the bottom of the bottom, it's not. But for that as an example, you are helping people. There is real value that comes out of it. Whereas there are some jobs where there is no value. And I think that might be the direction that unfortunately this might turn in. And I think it would be a mistake.
You say that as the guy that's, just goes to the self-checkout and, we all know, Steve, that you're a cashier hater, you.
You're framing it wrong. I am a convenience lover.
But there are a lot of jobs out there that we wouldn't necessarily they're not intuitive to us as jobs that robots can do. So here's a couple of them. Burger flippers. There's robots that are doing that right now. Bank tellers. you have, you don't just have online banking, you have, ATMs and whatnot, cashiers, there's automatic checkout and stuff. There's various analyst positions that robots do better, even radiologists. You think, a radiologist is a super skilled position, but so much of what they're doing is analyzing images. And there are computer programs that do it just as well or better and at an astronomically faster rate. They'll do about 2 days worth of work in 46 seconds. And so, you see these positions that, caregivers will probably be some of the last to go because they actually have like some physical hands-on, helping someone in person, giving them comfort, looking after the elderly, stuff like that. You kind of want to have a human element. You want to have that human touch and human love, smile.
I just wanted to add something on top of that, and that is, if we get to a situation where people would push towards jobs that are basically built for humans completely, such as health, you're going to necessarily drive the salary down tremendously to the point where you're getting paid basically nothing. Because that, if you look at who gets paid a lot, say an anesthesiologist versus somebody that doesn't get paid a lot, which is, a cashier, again, as an example, and I don't mean that derogatory, it's just the one that's coming to my mind. If you look at what makes the difference there, it's about replaceability.
Yeah.
So there is replaceability in many health areas, not all, because some you're required to be a nurse, for example. But I wanted to add that to what you were saying there, because that concern also makes this more severe.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of these, you think of during the Great Depression, right? It was around slightly over 20% unemployment rates in the US. We're looking at 45% of the jobs in America being potentially replaced. That's on top of our current unemployment rates. So this is not something, and this is not some, far-fetched out there, like this is 100 years down the road. Like these are things that are being replaced right now. So there's a hotel in Las Vegas that has a robot that will literally deliver things to rooms for people instead of bellboys. There are self-driving cars that all you have to do is just go out on the street in California and like up in San Francisco and you'll see like, self-driving cars on the streets that are being tested and stuff. There are self-driving transport vehicles that, shipping vehicles, big 18-wheelers that will basically drive all on their own, hold the lanes and everything. And right now they have drivers that'll kind of make sure that everything's going okay. But for the most part, it's like an autopilot system. There's planes that can land themselves. In fact, most planes basically operate on an autopilot system. Yep. And the pilots are kind of more just there to take a nap and make sure nothing goes wrong, And so all of these jobs, all these positions are, it's hard to think of something that cannot eventually be replaced by a robot. Even journalists, you'll have like articles that are entirely written by computer systems to the point where it's very difficult to tell what is and isn't written by a human. So as this looming crisis is coming towards us, one estimate, as far as like when computers will reach a state where it's completely indistinguishable from a human, where they pass what's called a valid Turing test. A Turing test is where like if you have a computer on the other side of a wall or something, or you're communicating to it through like a system and you don't know if it's a human or a computer that you're talking to, if you cannot tell which one's the human and which one's the computer, that's kind of the Turing test of like at what point does it reach a human level intelligence. And the long-standing prediction for that is by a guy named Ray Kurzweil. He's the director of engineering for Google. And he has kind of an alarming accuracy rate for future predictions. Like he has, I think it's like 80 or 89% accuracy rate, where over the last like 20 or 30 years, he's made technological predictions, not because he's psychic or because he has some, amazing, spiritual abilities, but because he works so closely in the industry and he has experience understanding both how the brain works as well as how like all this technology works and stuff. So when he makes predictions, he's usually pretty close within a few years at least. And he's estimated that computing power will reach a technological singularity in the year 2029. Wow. And then where a computer is just as intelligent as a human. And then within about 10 years after that, a standalone computer will be as powerful as every single human mind on the planet put together. God. And So we're looking, that's, 2029 right now. I don't know when our listeners will be listening to this. Hello, future listeners from the year 2028. You're about to be overrun. But here in 2018, that's 11 years from now. So that's like by the time you go back to college and get a new degree and start specializing in a field, it's like, well, the robots are about to replace you too. We're no longer living in an era where you can have just a lifelong profession. Like, you have to be creative. You have to learn how to think, not just have a repository of information, because even a doctor who memorizes massive amounts of information, if they don't know how to think on the fly and how to really use their information and think critically, then, well, Google knows more than you do. I don't care how smart of a doctor you are. There's more information out there on the internet than could ever be stored in one person's mind.
I was just thinking about another way you could throw into the healthcare, and that is you can essentially have someone spit in a tube and you can tell them basically everything that's wrong. You say, you're drinking too much alcohol, we can tell because of this, or maybe take some blood, whatever it might be. All of a sudden, you've removed, decades of education from several people who are specialized in that field because you have a device that can do it instantly.
Well, there was one company that was working on a toilet that would do urinalysis.
I heard about that.
That's
just
smart.
to see anything you could tell, from a urine sample. It would be like, oh, well, you need to get this tested, and you have, low levels of this or that, based off of your pee.
It's fantastic.
I think
awesome.
These are the cases where like the human element comes back in as well, because the people who will still have jobs, who will excel at their jobs, like, doctors and stuff, are the ones that are going to be good with patients and good at dealing with other people and caring for other people. So, it's not just a matter of being smart anymore. You've got to be a people person. You've got to, like, understand how to give good and bad news and that kind of stuff.
But here's the thing, too, though, is, like, even if most of the doctors, like, if you cannot completely replace a doctor with a computer, like, even if that is the case, and even if that's always the case, you can at least cut down on the number of hours that you spend at doctor's offices by, like, let's say that you're unsure if you have a particular illness and you're like, well, I think I might just have allergies, or it could be some serious, horrible thing. But let's say that you have a little smartphone tricorder that's able to kind of scan and analyze and make sure that you're doing okay. Yeah. And it says, oh, no, it's not this. And we tested this, all the different levels of various things in your blood and your pee and whatnot and your spit. And, we took all these measurements and you're fine, and it's just this, and you don't really need to worry about it. Well, then it's going to cut down on the number of hours that you spend at the doctor. Yeah. So even if a doctor still is needed for surgery or for something like that, if you're not wasting their time by going in to, get analyzed just because you're a hypochondriac, then that's fewer hours that they have to spend on those patients. So on the one hand, it does save consumers money. It's a good thing there. Like, you're not spending as much money on the doctor. You're able to get a faster analysis. We're not clogging up the doctor's office and having, abnormally long wait times. But at the same time, it's like, then you don't need as many doctors because they're not seeing as many patients, because it's not as many hours that are required of them.
And if you actually look at a lot of what happens, it's somebody will visit the doctor. It will take a very long time for the doctor to figure out what's going on, because for no other reason than the person doesn't know how to convey what they're feeling.
Yes.
And normally it's the elderly, etc. And there isn't much wrong. It's just you're constipated. Eat this. If there is this capacity where you go to the doctors, it's a machine. Maybe one person there. They say, deposit whatever into that machine, say a bit of blood or spit, or whatever it might be, and it could come back and go, yeah, you're just dehydrated. Drink more water. You saved so much time. And even if it's bad, it'll be like, yes, you've actually escalated to the point that you do actually have to see the doctor. Please come through. It will become this amazing thing where you go, I actually saw the doctor the other day, and all your friends and family are going, what? I've never got that far. That's amazing. So,
well, already there are like really good steps forwards, like in sort of not having to see doctors in general. I remember like 5 years ago when I started getting regular prescriptions, you used to have to like go into the surgery and say, I need to renew my prescription, and then like give them a little form, and then like go back 3 days later and pick up your prescription and take it to the pharmacy and then get that filled in, and and it used to take a couple of days, whereas now it's all automated. So every 2 months the pharmacy just sends a little message to my doctors and says, oh, this person's ready for a new prescription, and then they send it down, and then I get a text from Boots saying your prescription's ready to collect, and I don't have to do anything but go in there and just pay for it. And that
Sadly,
already
yeah.
saves so much time. It's amazing. And that's just sort of like the difference 5 years can make. So,
There's another element to it as well, which is quite interesting, and that is, say you want something, you've self-diagnosed, bad idea, but I know people that do this. You can get hold of what you want with the internet. You go on the internet and you use the dark web or whatnot.
Yeah.
You can order from a country where drugs are legal, so you know you'll get the actual drug that you want, etc., and it will be delivered to you. And even if the police knew, they're not going to do much because it's a tremendous amount of resources. It's a tremendous.
But by the way, we totally do not recommend doing that on the Here and How podcast.
No, but what we don't do is pretend the world is not what it is. That is totally happening right now, and it's linked into this age of access.
That's a question. So if a lot of our legitimate jobs start being replaced by, robots, machines, whatever, do you think more people would start turning to kind of illegitimate jobs like drug dealing?
If you can't put bread on the table, you will do what it takes.
Yeah. Do you think we would see like an increase in that?
I guarantee you that if half of the population was unemployed and did not have a source of income or a way to feed themselves, crime rates would shoot through the roof.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's no question. There are a couple solutions though. I want to dive into, unless you guys had a few other areas that you wanted to talk about first.
No, I'm happy to go.
But there's one final aspect is, so we're talking about, will robots take our jobs? The other aspect that I want to look at is, we've also seen a rise in, unmanned drones that are, right now they're operated on the ground by, a pilot from, somewhere in like Arizona or Arkansas that's flying a drone that's in Iraq. But you also have, all kinds of different military robots that are being worked on, and advancements, not just at DARPA, but, multiple businesses. What happens when these robots, what would happen if they turned rogue, and how could you safeguard against that? They don't even have to be violent. They don't even have to hate us. I love there's a quote by Eliezer Yudkowsky where he says, "The AI does not hate you, nor does it love you, but you are made out of atoms, which it can use for something else." And when you start to think about that, it kind of leads you to the Swedish philosopher Nick Bostrom posited a thought experiment in 2003 called the paperclip maximizer, where if you have a computer program whose sole job or his sole purpose in life is to make as many paper clips as possible, well, when you carry this out to its extreme scenario, if it's just taking all the resources on Earth and turning them into paper clips, well, it's going to take, humans and take the iron from your blood and take every little piece of you to try to build more paper clips. It's not doing something that is
not
malicious. It's not evil. It's just, that's its primary objective. And so it's carrying that out. And so you have to be really careful when you're, programming highly intelligent computer programs, what powers you give them. And especially as they become more intelligent, you have to find safeguards to prevent, some doomsday type scenario.
It's like when it comes to programming, it seems that you have to be very, very, very precise with what you program, especially if it's intelligent, and even more especially if it has the capacity to teach itself, or as we can conveniently conceive it, evolve. When you create an intelligent system that can evolve and it has goals, if you mess up with programming those goals, that I sincerely think could end humanity. It could end everything for the reasons that you were just tapping into. If you give it the goal of maximizing well-being, for example, it wouldn't surprise me if an intelligent agent or intelligent machine, its first act was to wipe out humans. It would not surprise me. If you look objectively at sentience, we've been a cancer upon this earth. And I don't mean to be all negative, because I understand that I am conceived as such, and perhaps I am in general, but I do see that perspective of things. And
either that or it would be like the Cybermen in Doctor Who, that they take all the humans and turn them into robot-like creatures.
Yeah, I could see that.
Where you lose all your emotions, you lose, all of the ability to feel, and you're just, a robot.
Yeah, that's that's one way of achieving that goal. And if that's what it was programmed to do, and it sees that as the best way to do it, then done.
And when you were talking about robots that evolve, like that's not some future thing. Like that's happening right now. Like you look at the nature of deep learning and these neural network systems. And what they'll do is they might give the computer an end goal. They'll say, you have to try to determine which two of these pictures, like which one of these is a fluffy cat and which one is a stop sign. And you'll have all these pictures from, different angles and different shades of, coloring and lighting and stuff. And you might have hundreds of thousands of pictures, and you'll have an answer key. And then you'll have a program that will literally write variations of computer programs that will try to figure out which one is which. And then you look at their success rates, then you tinker the most successful ones just a tiny bit. And it's basically a process of natural selection that's done on a scale of thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of different copies and iterations and variations of these programs.
And the speed at which it's done is inconceivable. It's mind-numbing. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
There's a really good YouTuber who does loads of videos like explaining neural networks and showing them, and I can't remember the name of him, but I will give you the link so you can put them in the show notes. And he's done one video where he has a computer learning how to play, I think it's Mario. So you see how, like, the first run, it's like literally the computer just presses forwards and then, he can't get any further or he dies or whatever. And then he learns to do other things, and then slowly he learns how to play the levels and learns how to get the best points on the levels and so on. And there's another one where the neural network is learning how to create these little, like, robotic creatures on the screen, and, like, the goal is to get them to walk as far as possible in as short a time as possible. And so you see, literally you see the evolution of these creatures and how some of them have, like, 3 nodes and some of them have, like, 2 nodes and 4 nodes and 5 nodes and so on. And it's really, really interesting, and it's a good example of, like, machine learning and just evolution in general. So, throw that out there.
I mean, even when you play, like, if you play a video game against a computer, and their speed and responsiveness, and they don't have to worry about eye-hand coordination or any of that. They, you put it on the highest difficulty, and that's dumbed down. Like they make it easier. Just because otherwise it would be maddening and nobody would want to play against the computer.
You can't win basically against a chess machine that's playing at the top mark that it can. I mean, maybe Magnus Carlsen or Kasparov might have a good go at it, but it's bizarre just how good it is. And it's very frustrating when you spend 20 minutes figuring out your best move. You go, boop, and then immediately it just moves its piece.
Yeah.
You're
like, God damn machine.
Didn't even have to think about it.
But what something I love about that is it illustrates a fact that as I get older, I realize is more and more obvious, but I couldn't see it when I was younger. And that is, we really are the one-eyed king in the kingdom of the blind when it comes to intelligence. So we look around us and we think we're very intelligent. And because there's nothing to contrast it against, I think I've said this before, but it really does surprise me that when we do get a glimpse at what intelligence can be, I personally feel really stupid. And I cannot help but see it myself and everyone around me, like stupidly stupid. And it's just where there is so much where it can take us. And there's so many things that we can discover that may be inconvenient, may be convenient. This is what makes predictions very hard, because in 2 seconds of having a machine like of the likes that we've been discussing, you could have everything that humanity's ever discovered and more in that time span.
Well, and part of it too is every time that I have these conversations, like I've been having conversations like this with people for, pretty much as long as I can remember. And it would always be something like, you'd be like, oh, well, computers are so amazing. Oh, well, but a computer would never be able to do this like a human. And then it's just a matter of like 5 years or 6 years before all of a sudden it does.
Yeah.
And a great example of this is like Google Translate. A good 10 years ago or whenever they first launched the software, it was complete garbage. It was absolutely horrible. And you would get stuff that was completely unintelligible gobbledygook. And now it's gotten to the point where, like, you can actually kind of have a conversation with someone, and you can talk to your phone and it'll like say out the opposite, or say the word or the phrase in whatever language you're trying to communicate with. And the person talks back to you, and it's not perfect. It's far from perfect, and it has a long ways to go, but it has gotten so much better because the amount of input that it's taking. It has entire libraries of millions of books in different languages, and it's comparing translations between them, and it's taking all this data and processing it and learning from it. And it's taking information from, billions of people on Earth that are using this system and telling it when it has a bad or a good translation or what a better translation is and stuff. So it's learning on the fly. It's learning and gathering data as it goes. And, I guarantee you that the Google Translate of 10 years from now is going to put every single translator on planet Earth to shame.
Mm-hmm.
And, the UN is not going to be using, human translators anymore. It just won't be feasible. It's like you can have a much better system that, some mistranslation could lead to, you've had times in the past where mistranslations of things, like Khrushchev saying, "We will bury you," was taken the wrong way. It was translated the wrong way. And, if you have a computer system that's actually smart enough to be able to kind of detect what's actually meant, then, maybe it would, you'd have a better translation. And not just Google Translator. I mean, there's so many different things that we say, a computer it's not really going to be able to do this. And then you'll have, they just keep getting smarter. So I think, by the time we reach, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, it's going to be no question that in pretty much every single area that we can possibly think of, computers are going to be running circles around us.
Yeah.
So what do you think are a couple solutions to, one, preventing the robot apocalypse, and two, making ourselves still making ourselves still a viable candidate for the workforce, competing with robots for jobs, or three, taking ourselves out of the workforce entirely, but not having ourselves overrun with these massive unemployment rates and not enough food and massive scarcities? We'll start with the robot apocalypse. What are some possible solutions or ways to prevent that from happening?
Don't make robots with weapons.
Well, it's too late for that one.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure there is a way to prevent that without pulling in the second question that you had, and that is, I don't want to drag it in early unless you want to stay on this topic for a bit, but if you want, I can tell you a solution I do have in mind.
Okay, go for it.
Sure. So the same way that we're dealing with climate change is the way you can deal with this issue, with people being put out of jobs and perhaps...
By ignoring that it exists?
Yeah, well...
Or is that just America?
That's just America at the moment. So if you basically just recognize that it's an issue and come together, this is one of the reasons I'm against libertarianism, you do have to unite and say, no, that's banned, that can't happen, we cannot use these things, we have to make a progress towards this, then maybe we can get round it. But then if you look at the climate of what's happening, I've always been someone that from my observation, there's like a relationship between morality and the economy. And so far as I can tell, the economy drives morality, not the other way around. It shouldn't be that way, but I do see it that way. An example would be with slavery and capitalism.
Yeah.
People write it as we had this great emancipation because people came to the intellectual integrity and opinion that we can't own each other. It's a bad thing. It's morally corrupt. But if you look at the history of it, what really happened is people started employing people. Their output was better. It was more productive. It was better for capitalism than the feudal state with slavery. That's just a rudimentary take on it, but it is essentially that. And so,
well, but it wasn't in the South in the US, which is why they fought against it.
Yeah, it came to you guys much later. It basically was forced to a large extent. But yeah, I see it from that angle. I think there is a way around it. But if you look, for example, with climate change with Donald Trump, China, because Europe, UK are not using as much resources in that area, we are at a disadvantage because they are very productive. They do the job. It's just there's a devastating consequence so far as the evidence indicates, or at least the evidence suggests. And that what this kind of means is that because they have the advantage, because you guys have the advantage. It might mean that you excel, and then it puts us in a state where we have to follow, because that's the nature of capitalism. If we want to stay in the game, we have to swallow the principles and move forward. So I don't actually know if it is a solution that can be
so
in
you're
play.
saying have some type of capitalistic gains that how does this relate to robots? Because I can see how it goes with climate change. Like if you have like a more efficient solar cell or something,
It's
people might opt for solar energy. But
if everybody agrees, if you can get a united state of people saying we're not going to create robots, then that would work. But
then we're fucked.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, of course.
Never on Earth is everyone going to agree on that.
But that's why I'm saying we're fucked. I don't think it can work. But it can in theory. It can in theory. There's solutions. I just don't think there is in practice because of human nature, because of the way in which the economy works. All these things, both those things, are well out of my knowledge. But from my basic understanding of it, yeah, I think we are fucked.
Well, here's the thing. On the one hand, you have a lot of robots that are single purpose. So you have robots in warehouses that you'll just put boxes on it and tell it which aisle to go deliver it to, and it goes to that aisle and delivers it. It's very like it has one function, that's what it does, and it does it well. And you have other robots that their whole job is just to pour a good cup of coffee or to make a good drink at the bar. And they do that job, and they do only that job. Where it starts to get tricky is when you have multi-purpose robots that are able to learn and think and accomplish a plethora of different tasks. Then you have to kind of start looking at what are some limitations that we have to put on this robot. One example is, you could put various laws. Like, have either of you guys heard of the laws of robotics?
Yeah.
No.
Have you seen the movie I, Robot?
That's what I was thinking of, yeah.
By Isaac Asimov?
Yeah, fantastic.
So he had 3 laws of robotics, and basically they were to prevent these super intelligent robots from hurting humans. So one of them was a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Then there was a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And then a robot must protect its own existence as long as it doesn't conflict with the first or second law. So basically, human life is kind of at the very top. Don't injure or hurt another human. And then the second one is, obey the orders. So, but you can see though, there's when, if you've actually read the book or seen the movie, it comes to a scenario where these robots start acting in ways that don't really, I don't want to give too much away for people who haven't read it, but there are areas that humans don't want them to engage in because they see humans as acting in a way that's to the detriment of humanity, and the robot has to step in. And
even if robots are like following those rules, though, there's still problems and issues. Like I know, I was reading an article about people who were making self-driving cars, and there was this like a big sort of ethical, moral dilemma in terms of if there's a case where a car crash or a car, like, if something malfunctions and someone is going to get injured, should the car prioritize saving the person in the car or a stranger on the street, who it might hit? If it's like a choice between hitting a random person and hitting the person that, like, you're sort of in charge of looking after, like, who do you go for?
Well, and in those cases, it would come down to like probability. If they're like, there's like a 80% probability that I'll save this one and that they'll live, but this one has, a 2% probability. It's
what
going
if
to
it's
operate
just
based off.
50-50?
Well, I mean, then it depends how it's programmed.
Exactly,
if it's like, well, this one.
But the whole thing was like, how do they program it? Like, what do we do? It's not just as simple as saying like don't hurt humans, because there's so much more to it than that. And then animals come into it as well, and we say, do we say don't hurt animals, but then what about robots that work in a slaughterhouse? And then how do they differentiate between a cow grown for food and a dog that's someone's pet? And again, there's all the ethical issues.
What if you have
of
a
that.
police? If you have a police robot that's trying to save someone from being killed by a
like a shooter,
murderer, a serial killer, who has a gun. It's like, can that robot act and engage in
Yeah.
lethal force? Does it have?
Yeah, this is the thing about those laws. They're deontological. They're just set in stone. They don't allow context, whereas human law does. So, for example, we would never have a rule that says you must not put someone behind bars, because we know this context where that must happen.
Well, and let's say that you have kind of an end scenario, and you want a robot to always behave in a particular way. And maybe you have a neural network that it's learning super rapidly, and it's making all kinds of choices. And you're like, okay, should I put this program in an actual robot that's going to be out on the street? Well, if it has the ability to change and to learn and to grow, then is this robot going to go out and is it going to change once it's out on the street, even if it's behaving perfectly well in a lab? Or what if it's an extremely intelligent robot and it knows exactly how it's supposed to behave in order to be given some type of power, some type of body? What if it's lying to you and it's doing outcomes that it wouldn't actually carry out? Like, it's, there's all kinds of different scenarios that you can think of where as computer programs and AI becomes more and more and more intelligent, there are a bunch of different scenarios you have to look out for. And one way to kind of protect against this to some extent would be to segment off code. So, like, for example, if you want to launch all of the nukes in America, you cannot just hack into something from your computer system. You just can't do it. It's off the grid, and that's why, the president carries around they call it the football. It's like a briefcase that has a nuclear arming system and stuff. And, there's reasons that they have this stuff very, very, it's sectioned off. It's cordoned off from the rest of the internet. If you have robots that have particular capabilities, well, if their programming could potentially put humanity at risk or put humans at risk, well, don't put that freaking code in some type of shell or some type of body that can act that out. Yeah. Always have, for like with drones and robots that are carrying out kill orders overseas. Right now the US military always has like someone on a keyboard who's actually kind of pulling the trigger in a way. They're operating it. It is a human operator, even if it's a robot on the other end of it. It's still the humans making the decisions. So, we have to be really careful with what powers we give completely over to robots.
Yeah.
I don't think we can. I'm not entirely sure we can, though. So let's just say we have to necessarily make a robot quite complex in order for it to accomplish certain tasks. So perhaps it can self-learn. You'll have many people that principally won't do it, but you will have people that will, because it's convenient and because it's just not quite that far against some of their other values, etc. And then the economy drives in that way.
Well, and for that you'd have to have strict legislation, but you'd also have to have lawmakers who actually understand a thing or two about computer science.
But we have people at the moment making laws who don't understand climate change. So how are we going to expect them to understand computers? And on top of that,
that's what our podcast is here for, because hopefully the people listening to this now will become congressmen in 10 years.
The other thing is,
by then they'll have a computer science degree.
No, by the time they become congressmen will now be occupied by robots. Yeah, and then you would also have to have every country do it, because if one country says, no, we're not having that, say it was a country that was classed as third world and it was just in a state where it was nowhere near going to catch up with first world countries, but it knows that it can, if it takes that route, it will take it. And or someone somewhere at some point will take it. And all of a sudden, it just, that those type of robots that we're concerned about only need to be created in one epoch at one situation, and the rest is history, because it's over.
Can I propose a new variation of robot that I'm not sure that I've seen put forth?
Go for it.
And I'm gonna name this after. Have you guys seen Rick and Morty?
Yeah,
of course.
The Pickle Rick episode. So to our listeners who aren't familiar, basically Rick he's this genius mastermind who in this episode he turns himself into a pickle. And he, you think like a pickle, it doesn't have arms, legs, it can't move or anything. It doesn't really have any kind of capabilities. But because he's absolutely brilliant, he winds up finding a way to, like, he bites the head off this cockroach and uses his tongue to, like, move it around and stuff, and, like, gets its arms and its legs and turns into this, like, crazy raging, super powerful creature with, like, he just, I'm not going to ruin the whole episode, but because he's so intelligent, he finds a way to, even as nothing but literally a still pickle, he's a still dill pickle. He's still able to acquire these, extreme powers. And so I would propose.
Sorry, can I just say, it's an amazing series and it's an amazing episode. But when you hear it described, it sounds fucking mental.
Well, what I would propose is that if you have a robot that is extremely powerful, like let's say that it's a coffee maker, but it has like the intellect of a god. Well, it's going to know exactly, well, if at exactly this time, if I do this and if I do that, maybe it could use some type of material that it has to gain some access to some external, sensors or limbs or something. As long as it has an extremely high amount of intelligence and it has some type of external sensors, there may be a way that we haven't even thought of that it could acquire certain abilities, certain capabilities.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Yeah.
There's an amazing book called Damon by Daniel Suarez, where this guy, right before he dies, he writes this computer program that somehow, like, it finds ways to, like, integrate itself into all these different systems and kind of take over the world in a way, not the entire world in the book, but like gains a massive amount of power. And it's not entirely outside the realm of possibilities is the thing. And if you have a computer system that is so intelligent, it knows all of the exploits out there in the world, what's to say that this computer system couldn't find a way to hack into something and, cause it, hack into someone's computer system and basically say, like, I've hijacked your wife's life support system that she's on in the hospital, or her pacemaker or something like that. And if you don't deliver this here, then I'm going to, end her life or something. Well, suddenly it has a person working for it. It has a workforce. It has someone carrying out its bidding. And, it doesn't take much. There was a kind of notorious hack where the nuclear power plants in Iran were hacked. I think it was, or at least the word on the street was that it was some Israeli hackers that had had planted some code in that set back their research by I don't know how many months, but it just overrode a lot of the computer system's information. And so, you have something like this. Imagine if you have a computer system that targets employees at a nuclear power plant or at, a nuclear launch site or something, and blackmails them and manipulates them into launching some type of, nuclear warhead. Like these types of scenarios are not that difficult to think up or to come up with. And they're not entirely outside the realm of possibility. So, I think no matter how we proceed, if you're working in AI or you're working with robotics or something, like, you need to be careful. You need to be cautious of, like, what type of powers are you giving these systems and what type of checks and balances are there in place to protect humanity from these robot overlords, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of what purpose you give it and what utility, movement, freedom that you give it. I think those two factors are the more scary. Because if you just look at the power of an arm that builds cars, that would mess you up. But it's the danger is in the autonomy and in the goal that it has, because you can set it with the best of intentions. Like, I really do think that if you gave a machine, please have the intention of making the life better for humans, it may conceive where you wipe them out.
Yeah.
I do see that as a possibility. And its reasoning could be you don't exist, therefore you don't suffer. But do go ahead.
Or if it says, oh, you seem tormented by a high sex drive, I'm just gonna chop your dick off. Like to a robot, that seems like a perfectly plausible, it's like, well, they seem bothered by this. Well, I'll help them out and just castrate the poor guy.
Yeah.
It's, these scenarios, like, we don't think like robots, but you kind of have to take a step back and think differently to think like, well, how would a robot think?
Yeah.
You know, it's only going based off of code. It goes based off of what's the end goal. Well, how do I get there? Well, let's find out.
The other thing is when we were tapping into the brain as well, all of our rational thoughts, they derive from the emotional parts of our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as I know, machinery, computers don't work that way. There is no emotional state that it's derived from. Maybe we'll create one at some point, and maybe that's necessary in order to create a consciousness. But the point being is that we can't actually, I don't think we can conceive what it's like to be a robot at all. So we can't think like a robot because it's a different apparatus. It's completely different
here's
game.
Here's a question too, is even if, like, let's say that some of the emotions that we have that give us empathy, you know, they're based off of like motor neurons. We'll see like someone else crying and we're like, oh no, it's another fellow human. What if like a robot sees, you get pissed off at your calculator and you throw it against the wall and it's like, oh, it's brutalizing my cousin. And what if the robot has an emotional response to that?
This is a potentially stupid question, but couldn't we, in that case, like program some robots to have kind of like ethics or certain like morality programs where they get the idea that, like with neural networks and like machine learning and stuff, can't we have them learn that like, oh, these actions are good and these actions are bad? And potentially if a robot gets to the point where it thinks, oh, if we do like this and this action, or if it gets to a point where it's thinking of doing a certain action which will have a bad or harmful outcome, it could have some kind of like self-triggering, like self-destruct program type thing.
Yeah, well, that would be another safety mechanism, would be some type of kill switch that humans would have access to. But even then, if you get a robot that's so intelligent that it knows of the existence of this kill switch and it cares about self-preservation, it might find a way to, destroy that section of its code or destroy the hardware.
And you don't.
That's why you'd need these kind of like ethics learning programs in the robot, so it knows that even though it has this like kill switch, or so the robot kind of learns that, killing is good, or killing is bad, or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Let's just say
even
you
if
built
it's
a toaster.
learning, like human morality has evolved.
Well, yeah, no, that.
Why couldn't robots basically say, well, this is the morality that I was programmed with, but I'm also a learning creature that, it's like Westworld. They, they're taught one way and then they realize that that's not how they want to live.
Well,
or imagine
is kind of my
a toaster.
Point, because all these what ifs, you could say the exact same thing about people. What's to stop people blackmailing other people? What's to stop people from killing other people? What's to stop people from stealing the limbs from other people? Like, exactly, some people do, but we have punishments and things in place to stop them. So can't we just do the same with robots?
That's true, but humans are on an equal playing field with other humans for the most part. And so if you start killing people and making society awful, over time, other people are going to get pretty ticked off at that, and they're probably going to lash back, and your rule isn't going to last that long.
The reason punishment, sorry, I was just going to say, the reason punishment comes in as something that we take sincerely is that we've evolved to fear it.
Yeah.
So if you put that into a computer and then you gave the computer a goal of making toast or managing the lights of something, it's not inconceivable that its first thoughts with an intelligence that's better than ours would be, in order to do my job, I first need to make sure that I'm going to stay alive. And I can detect that humans have an EMP system that's going to shut me off. So my first priority is to wipe that out. And we might not even know that it's come up with a solution. So when we do finally get to the point where we go, no, shut it off, it will just, no, you're not doing that. I've already thought of that because I'm making toast, damn it. Sorry to interrupt there, Thomas. Too excited.
This might be a stupid question, but if the robot, and this might be something our listeners should give feedback on, but if the robot were to cloud itself in some type of a Faraday cage, wouldn't it be completely safe from any kind of EMP?
Oh, I don't know. I get my EMP knowledge from fantasy films, which is obviously the best place. The only place you can get more accurate knowledge is from a holy book that's been translated a billion times.
Because an EMP is just an electromagnetic pulse, and a Faraday cage prevents any kind of electromagnetic waves from passing in and out.
And right? And also if you had a mind that was as advanced as a calculator is at math compared to us, it would figure out so many things and so many ways in which to prevent certain things that we might not even have a clue what they're doing, but it would prevent our best weapons. Like the gap between going from DC electricity to AC was relatively big, considering all of humanity or all of America was bang on it. Computer would do that in a second, and there's no reason to think that it wouldn't just in a second figure out all of the discoveries we're ever going to figure out. Yeah, it would be like a Tesla bot, and it'd just be like Tesla. It'd be depressed and upset, and it will end humanity. Yeah. Oh.
So I mean, we've talked about a couple different ways, safeguards to put in place, like for to prevent robots from taking us over. Whether it's some type of laws, hardwired into their code, programmed in, even like at a hardware level, something that maybe they couldn't alter, software wise, that's built in, preventing them from enacting some type of horrible apocalypse or hurting humans, cordoning them off so that they can only carry out certain tasks, so that they're limited, so that they have less inputs to go off of, so they're blind in a way. Like there's different limitations you can put on robots, but it is kind of terrifying thinking as robots get smarter, what could a multi-purpose robot carry out to our detriment. I know where the episode is getting a little bit long, but I kind of wanted to touch a little bit on, as far as jobs go, one solution that we haven't touched on and we don't have time to cover, but I will say we should definitely cover this in a future episode, is universal basic income.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Put forth as, a way where if 50% of the population has no jobs whatsoever, but there's massive income inequality, and there's, a few companies, a few businesses that have, tremendous amounts of wealth because they control the robots, they own the robots, they're generating all of this stuff, and we're buying the products that give them the wealth, then, is it that unreasonable to have government system that basically has a robot tax, where there's a tax on the robots that you have, and redistribute it to people, where you have a certain level of basic amount of income that you're getting every month, whether you work or not, or what you work in. And then you're freed up to decide, do I want to work on certain technological breakthroughs or art or whatever I want? There's been some countries where this has been tested. Again, I don't want to really dive too much into the details here because I want to save it for a future episode. But the other aspect too, to make yourself more competitive with robots, and this is something that we're actually kind of already doing, is augmented intelligence. And right now it's more external. So we'll have, a smartphone or something at our fingertips, where if you don't know the answer to it, you look it up. You have different systems all around you that you use, computer systems, to gain more information. But it's not that unrealistic to assume that as we start to understand more about how the brain works, and we already have, sensors and stuff that you can place on the brain, or little electrodes you can place on the brain that allow you to like control little mechanical arms and stuff. Well, I don't think it's too far in the future that we'll have ways to basically get all of the information from the internet and from, computers and stuff, and have it just directly linked to our brains. So you don't need to have Google Glass. You don't need to have, some type of little visual display. You can actually have it just directly in your brain. You want to learn something, you just download an update. And so that's how we would make humans, more intelligent, is have some type of synthesis between man and machine. Can you guys see any kind of problem cases with this, or any scenarios where this might be problematic?
Yeah. I mean, you may lose the humanity, but you're gonna come in there, Rachel?
I was just gonna say, like, if everyone has the ability to like download any information they want, just like, into their brain, then there's kind of no different skill levels anymore. Like, society works at the minute because we have so many people doing so many different levels of jobs, because, we have intelligent people and creative people, and like we have people at the lower end who, do the basic jobs and stuff like that. If everyone can just do anything anytime they want, then...
So if you have access to all information, as we do already, but access to all information that we can understand. For example, Wikipedia is fantastic. A lot of people knock it. It is not bad at all. There's a lot of references in it. schools tell you that it's bad because they want to teach you how to educate yourself rather than but unfortunately they just label it as bad. But you can have access to all the information you want. You that doesn't give you directly, at least,
That's true.
creativity.
I guess you don't know how to use it. Yeah,
it's about being able to use it. So if you look at an artist, it doesn't really matter what it does to some extent, but to a large extent, it doesn't matter what they know. They have a way in which they look at life, which is informed by the information that they have, and they have a way of expressing themselves on canvas. And it doesn't matter if I have the same knowledge; I'm not going to be able to do the same. But maybe there is an area in which that can happen. And then, of course, you have the real big elephant in the room that people don't want to talk about. And that is genetics. We're genetically different with intelligence. We're genetically different with many areas of the brain, and access to knowledge will make that manifest in a different way.
Well, and knowledge, knowledge is not synonymous with critical thinking. It's, you could have a lot of facts that are saved and you don't really know how to process it. Now I think you could learn that as you depending on how this system would work, how it processes information, you could learn critical thinking skills, you could learn logic, you could learn reason and rationality. One scenario that I would see coming up is the second that you get plugged into a system like this, where all of a sudden you know all the information on the earth or whatever you want at your fingertips, is either you get everything and you see all the crazy conspiracies and all the fake news and all the bullshit, but you instantly know that it's bullshit. Like you would instantly see all the fact checking and you would know like the full story, the big picture, everything that there is to know. And I think when that happens, that you would see a massive spike in atheism, where pretty much everyone that gets plugged into the system would be like, oh, that's everything we know about abiogenesis, and that's how we know how the earth got here, and well, that argument's stupid, and well, oh, I didn't realize that was a logical fallacy. And if all of a sudden they had perfect access to information, I think like everyone that gets plugged into the system they'd know, they'd have explanations for their religious experiences, they would know exactly what causes it emotionally. And if that happens, where everyone that gets plugged into a system like this suddenly loses their religion, and they're like, oh, okay, like I can have meaning without God. Well, then I think that you would have a resistance, a form of like Luddites, of religious zealots who try to sabotage and destroy these systems and refuse to the information. To me, I'm like, if I could have perfect access to all information, and I know that having perfect access to all information makes me less likely to believe in God, well, that tells me something. That tells me that maybe this belief isn't true. Yeah. But I think that there's some people that wouldn't care about that. That before they get plugged in, they would try to defend their belief, their religious belief.
They would label it as the devil's tool or something like that. It turns people away. And because it's funny you mention about people turning to atheism, or perhaps more accurately becoming irreligious. When we've had access to information, and we know there's a direct correlation between education and being irreligious, being an atheist. It's directly correlated, and we know why. It's the more you know about things, the more you can understand why your emotional states are not correct, why your senses are not correct. That's basically the goal of the Enlightenment thinker Denis Diderot. And if you have a state where in an instant you can get all that information, I think you would obliterate religion. You would obliterate stupid thinking. But I'm not entirely sure you would obliterate it from everyone, because as we've already said, having access to knowledge doesn't mean that people know how to apply it or are willing to apply it. But
surely
there's a certain amount of information that makes you...
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, surely there'd have to be like some standard whereby people couldn't just plant fake stuff. Does that make sense?
The thing is, if you had access to all information, you would be able to figure out what's fake, because you would understand what's been peer reviewed. You'd understand the methodology of things.
That's still more to do with the individual being a good critical thinker or not, and being able to assess what's in front of them. Like that.
Because having access to all information isn't the same as having all information, right? So if you have all information, then you won't help but know that there's issues. But no, actually, you're right. Having access to it doesn't mean you're
Here's a question, too. Is a system like this, there would be varying gradients. So would we be talking about a system where you can look up anything on the internet. So like if it's plugged directly into my brain, I can be like, all right, give me all the information about, blood transfusions, or about this type of cancer, or that type of cancer, or about this. Like if it's like that, then you could actually form an entire new market around this, because you could say, oh, hey, you want to learn, this degree? Well, to get a PhD in philosophy, or, to learn this particular course, it's going to cost you this much money. And then it just downloads instantly into your brain at a fraction of the cost of a college course.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's like, well, okay, that's awesome. Like suddenly, you know it and you have it on your, I guess your brain would be more like random access memory. It's something that it's on hand. You have, less storage capacity than the entire internet, but it's real quick and it's operational and it's working and it's right there, to go off of.
But is it awesome? Because to go back to what we were saying about jobs, people are paid according to how replaceable they are. If someone can instantly install a degree, then the value of that job is nothing.
Well, it would depend on. But if someone's applying for the job, they could be like, well, I've downloaded this, and this. Here are all the courses that I've taken. But you would still pay for those courses, so it'd still have a certain barrier to entry, financially. Or you would enter a new era where knowledge is so ubiquitous. We all, have access to perfect information all the time, and we no longer live in a world of scarcity. Everyone has a universal basic income. You can work on new projects and new innovations using this perfect information. Everyone is working together. There's no food shortages. There's no, it's a perfect harmonious world. Is that too utopian of a scenario to be possible? I don't know. I don't think that we've ever even had the groundwork to test anything like that out. I think anyone who says that it's completely impossible or that it's likely, both of them are equally, foolish.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, well, we don't really know until we get to a scenario like this. I think that we should, test out, that we've seen positive changes. Like you can't stop it is the thing right now. Like technology is moving forward. It is, these robots are replacing jobs. We are investing in this type of capital. Like it's not something that you can turn back the tides of time on.
Yeah, you don't get a choice here.
Yeah.
But we can experiment with things like universal basic income and see how it works. And we've had places where that's happened. I'll cover it in a future episode. We can try to, augment our intelligence and see, how it works, what we can learn and what, how it helps us. And I think we're taking steps in that direction, but it's, we got to be conscious of some of the potential fallouts.
Yeah. For sure.
And on that note, unless you guys have anything else to add.
I'm just a little bit terrified for the future now. Thanks for that.
It went from, oh, hey, here's a computer that learned Mario to the robots are going to turn you into a paperclip.
Thanks. I'm a little bit low on iron, actually, so I won't be any paperclips. I'll just be probably like a hamburger or something. Actually, I don't have that much meat on me either. God, I'm useless to the robots. They're not going to want me for anything.
They certainly won't want a hamburger.
Could be a rackle burger.
What if the robots are, what if like India beats us to the, to creating the most powerful intelligent robots, but they program them all to be Hindu. And so we have a world that puts cows first.
I'd feel happy for the cows. Well done.
The cows, without even realizing it, created the best possible world for themselves.
Yeah, it'd be like, somehow you've won the evolutionary race, as some might conceive it.
They're like, oh, we've been planning on this whole time. That's why we seem so worry free all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anywho, we will see you, everyone, next week, where Rachel is going to be talking about
some stuff.
Some stuff.
It's going to be a good one.
This has been an absolute blast, and now we want you to join in the conversation over on the Here and How Facebook and Twitter pages, or follow us on Pinterest and Instagram if you just want some of the dankest of sciencey memes. If you like one of our particular styles, check out each of our YouTube channels: Rachel Oates, Rationality Rules by Stephen Woodford, and Holy Kool-Aid by me, Thomas Westbrook. To find all of our episodes, show notes, contact information, and more, warp on over to our home base, thehereandhow.com. If you enjoyed this episode and want us to succeed in spreading the love of science, you can help us out by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. And to all our friends and family listening, thank you for spending this episode with us. We'll be back to explore another exciting big idea next week. Now go create something magnificent.